Welcome to the Headley Highlight Show's Headley Headspaces. The Headspaces are a series of thoughts and musings I have during the course of the week, and I chew all over them and share them with you. And before I leap into this week's Headspace, I'd just like to say thank you to all the new subscribers who have gone to my YouTube channel, DeniseHeadley.com, and subscribed. Don't forget to hit the bell and wait for those notifications which will be popping up each week. You can also make a donation at DeniseHeadley.com on my website to ensure you keep getting this regular and unique content. Now, let's jump over to this week's Headspace, or one of my Headspaces this week. And this week's Headspace is called Desperate Ukraine and Irrelevant Europe. On Friday, President Trump's representatives and Mr. Putin's representatives are going to Istanbul. They will be going to thrash out the details of rekindling their diplomatic relationship. The reason this is important is because the Biden administration spent huge amounts of time destroying the basic communication relationships that are needed between countries, especially countries that have massive amounts of nuclear weapons at their disposal. And Trump and Putin have agreed to speak now that they are mediating a peace for the Ukraine. Desperate to attend this meeting is the representatives of the European Union, Ukraine itself, and of course, Keir Starmer, with his newly elected role of impersonating Winston Churchill. Every leader since Margaret Thatcher knows how important a good war is to rebrand you as something useful for the domestic audience, which he currently is not. His ratings are in the toilet. So that little sweaty cabal of sycophants and wannabes want to be at the table. And to this effect, the marketing PR campaign, the whole society approach levers, have been in full swing. Every single commentator talks about the role of peacekeepers in the Ukraine, talks about the role of the European Union in the Ukraine peace negotiations, and obviously speaks about the role of Zelensky in the peace negotiations. He's currently doing a grand tour of countries, still begging for money so that he can commit further national suicide on his country, with the support of the European Union and the deep state in America, of course. But the problem with his PR campaign is that nobody's buying the snake oil that he's selling. It doesn't matter how many times Mr. Macron and Mr. Keir Starmer get on the television with their national flags as a backdrop, talking about the need to increase defense spending and also deploy peacekeeping troops into the Ukraine. I am certainly bemused, perplexed, and totally unclear as to why this is a good idea. The Europeans want more war, and America and Putin, they just want to do business, and war gets in the way of that. And Mr. Putin and Mr. Trump are not extending an invitation to the sweaty cabal or the sweaty green t-shirt on this current occasion. You might be able to sip tea and I'll have to suffer your contribution, but that doesn't mean you have any influence in the negotiations. And that seems very clear to me. The European Union, Mr. Zelensky, and all those warmongering interests have been outflanked. And one of the reasons they've been outflanked is because Mr. Trump's new administration doesn't recognize the European Union as an entity to engage with. I did talk about this last week when I talked about J.D. Vance's Munich security speech, where he basically said, you don't have any values that we want to spend any more money upholding. You cancel elections. You're afraid of your electorates. And you also doctor elections when the results don't suit you. You have a problem with censorship. And your democracies are vacillated because they can be influenced by media campaigns bought by influential companies or hedge funds who want to destabilize your country. Therefore, we're not paying for that. Thank you and good night. That was the essence of what Mr. Vance said at the Munich Security Council address. And ever since that time, you've heard the European Union ramping up in your countries this conversation about the need and the importance to have the European Union and Zelensky present at the peace negotiations. So he can basically scupper it. I mean, let's face it, if he wanted peace and the European Union wanted peace, just like Mr. Trump said, you had 3 years. What were you doing? Absolutely nothing. Just engaging in a bloodbath, which has left the Ukrainian country looking like a demolition site in many places. So there's no locus for the European Union. It doesn't matter at what point Mr. Trump engages with its direct members, noticing he's not speaking to the European Union, he's speaking to specific leaders. The UK with Keir Starmer and Macron. And I'm sure at some point he's going to be speaking to the new chancellor in Germany, but only as individual countries. And this is the move that the European Union and the Europeans and the, Mr. Zelensky have been blindsided by. It would be in their interest, like Mr. Jeffrey Sachs said recently when he addressed the European Union, that you engage with direct conversations with Russia. But instead, the useless and unelected cabal in Europe, headed by Ursula von der Leyen, have put another set of sanctions on Russia. And it really is having an impact. Not. Their currency has not been destroyed, and their country has better economic growth than any other country in the European Union. So sanctions weren't the answer. And sanctions do not place the European Union in a position of negotiation with Russia when Mr. Trump is going to remove those sanctions. Mr. Jack Rubio said the sanctions are eventually going to be removed. So where does that leave Europe? And the owner of the green sweaty t-shirt with the copious smells coming from the armpits, Mr. Zelensky. I mean, he never changes his clothes. He's always wearing fatigues. He must have 2,000 of those t-shirts bought with American taxpayers' money. It leaves them sitting at the table outside of the garden, screaming and making a significant amount of noise in the local press, but not actually being involved in the meat and potatoes, unless, of course, you're signing away the mineral rights, Mr. Zelensky, because America now wants to be paid for their investment in the debacle, which is the destruction of your country. Keir Starmer is likely to sit down with Mr. Trump, I think, tomorrow. But what difference will that even make? It's not what Mr. Trump says. It's what Mr. Trump does that counts. Because Mr. Trump seems to say quite a few things. And I think one of the things he says is come in to these European leaders, sit down, why don't you have a Bourbon biscuit? And when you finish eating it, kindly exit stage left. You're not actually getting anything. But what we will do is we'll do the optics of you coming and having a meeting and you actually leaving with nothing. But you'll have a good strapline for your local propaganda presses and your commentators who, speak highly of your endeavors, irrespective of how useless and purposeless you are. So this desperate bid for relevance is going to continue. You'll probably see more press in events where Zelensky is sitting in an auditorium and talking about Ukraine 2025 like it's an expo event. But you won't see the interview that Mr. Putin gave covered in the same way, because Mr. Putin gave an interview on Wednesday where he basically said, we're looking forward to working with the Americans, but they hope that the war will stop in due course. And that tells me that he expects things to continue. He expects the war to continue. And he probably will be in agreement to peacekeeping forces, but they're probably only going to be about 4 of those. It's not going to be in any significant number for him to accept, so that, in 5 years' time, after the European Union and America have changed governments and they want to rekindle the war, they can effectively unfreeze that conflict. Mr. Putin is not that dumb. There's no unfreezing #Syria. Look what happened there. So I imagine this will be a decisive exercise because Zelensky is irrelevant and Europe is being ignored. And that's the crux of it. Neither of these two components are going to have any sway in the negotiations. They will be told what will happen and they will suck it up. because that's the nature of the relationship. They are subservient and irrelevant, and Zelensky doesn't really matter. He is an impediment to peace. And the likelihood is he will be removed long before the ink is dry that he signing away yet more of his country's assets in a deal with America for its rare earth minerals. So that's my 2 pence on the midweek review. I forgot to talk about the fact that in Germany, the Mr. Schulz lost the election. You have the Conservatives winning, but what I would call, I'm not sure if they're far left, far right anymore. I think we need to think about what we say about people in relation to far right. But I think what you have now is the party that's more right wing, certainly getting 20% of the vote, and that's the EDF in Germany. And the new chancellor is talking about building a new Europe with Germany at its heart. Ha! Is that before or after you repair the blown up Nord Stream pipeline? Please, these people are delusional. Anyway, that's the end of this particular Headspace. I hope you enjoyed it, where I talked about the irrelevance of President Zelensky, the deneutering of the European Union, and the fact that no matter how hard they scream, they have got no role to play in peace in the Ukraine. You know, as Trump says, Ukraine will never be a member of NATO. Never. Because America is NATO. And that's that. So I hope you enjoyed it. Do come back next week. Don't forget to like and share. And cut! Toodle pip chaps and chapettes.